All right. So we are live yet again, and we are discussing the same book from last week, Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson, Seven Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. Now, last week we discussed the demon dialogues, and those are freeze and flee, protest polka, and finding the bad guy. And this is going to kind of merge right into that. And actually, they work really well together because knowing one can actually help you understand the other. So today we are going to be talking about finding the raw spots. We are going to discuss actually what the raw spots are, how they show up, and what they may look like in your relationship. So I'm going to give you a few examples of what those raw spots may look like. And then we are just going to talk about why it matters and how it can help your relationship, and then going into that third conversation. And so if it is your first time here and watching this video, my name is Casey Charlotte King. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified sex therapist, and a practitioner licensed in the states of Texas, Mississippi, and North Carolina. And so let's kind of get into EFT. So, for those of you who don't know what EFT is, this is your first time just hopping on and watching this video. EFT, not to be confused with emotional freedom tapping, because that is something, completely different. EFT, emotionally focused therapy, is a very specific science backed framework or theory that helps improve the quality of relationships with couples, improve their connectedness, decrease, escalation, and help them have an overall secure relationship with their partner, and not just their partner but also a relationship with their self, more secure relationship with their self. So I do want to highlight the importance of that. And so in my practice at the Relationship Repair Center, formerly Lavender Healing Center, EFT is the primary theory that I use when working with my couples. EFT can also be used with families, and it can also be used with individuals. And so I do use a form of that when I work with individuals as well. So, again, last week we talked all about the demon dialogues, and today we're going to go into finding the raw spots. Right. And so, as some of you may be wondering, what actually is the raw spot? What does that mean? And so that raw spot is that very vulnerable place that's underneath the behavior. In my framework I have, it's called Beneath the Behavior. That's one thing that we study and what I teach individuals and couples in my practice on how to actually identify that and what it looks like. And so with finding the raw spots, while we often think that initial outburst, that initial cry, that initial response is the true raw spot, or the cry, it's really not. That's just how it's expressed. It's expressed through that behavior. And that behavior may be by withdrawing, by yelling, um, by aggressiveness, or maybe by just a fear where their body shuts down and maybe disassociates. Many times we don't really know we're kind of in that loop until we're actually having the argument. We know the beginning and we know the fight, but sometimes we don't know actually that we've kind of hit that raw spot with our partner. If you are hopping in, just say, hop in and say hello. Let me know that you are here, and like and subscribe to the video. And I think last time I just kind of so close into the screen, even though I'm not that close, it does appear that way. So let me kind of slide back a little bit. And in this book review, again, identifying that that raw spot is really the true feeling, not what's shown initially, but what comes, and not what comes after that, but that part underneath that we rarely talk about, that we don't know how to explain, that sometimes may have nothing at all to do with the relationship in itself. So, therefore, your raw spot is the real issue and not that of the surface. So, how does that show up? How does your raw spot actually show up in the relationship? And the sequence kind of looks like this. Partner one says something and they step on that raw spot. And you may not be aware, they're probably not aware that they stepped on that raw spot. That's step one. They trample all over that raw spot, which means they may say something that may be triggering to you. And then going into step two, it that trigger alerts something in you. And when it alerts something in you in partner number two, then they go into protective mode. What does protective mode look like? Protective mode looks like the demon dialogue from last week that I talked about. So that protective mode may be freeze and flee. They are going to shut down, they are going to escape because you said something that triggered, that vulnerable space in their body. Or they are going to, protest polka, or they're going to find the bad guy and blame and even self blame and get defensive or even, accusatory. So you trample on that raw spot, they are triggered, and the demon dialogue shows up. And most times you have no clue that it's there. You just know, well, crap. All I said was this, and now you're throwing a fit. Do you ever see that happening in your relationship, or even maybe in a way that you've responded, and your partner said, "All I said was, why didn't you take out the trash this morning?" And now you're giving me the third degree, and so it happens just as quickly as that, because that protest or that demon dialogue is protecting something that is so vulnerable that they have yet to touch, to work through, or that they may not even realize was there. And because you're so used to this pattern and you're not even aware of it, you really don't see it. And hence is why many couples may just stay in this loop for a long time. And protest polka is where couples, often live in the relational space, is protest polka. So you may not be aware that it's happening. You're aware that the argument is happening, but not aware of the cycle and why you may stay in it for so long. And so I'm going to give you some examples of what that may look like. What does it actually mean when I hit a raw spot? How do I know that I, hit a raw spot? So this is how it may show up to you. And here are some common raw spots. I'm not enough. I'm never going to be good at anything. I need to be in control, or I will be hurt. And we see this a lot. I do, especially in my practice in relationships, because that need to be in control is not about just wanting to be the boss and wanting to be in charge. It's all about just being able to ensure that you are protected. And where does that come from? Because there was somewhere along the way in your life where you were not protected, you were disappointed. It may be something traumatic that may have happened at a particular time in your life where you learned that I can only rely on me, even in relationships, because there is a part of you that wants someone that you can rely on. But because of history, because of trauma, because of what I sometimes call this, previous evidence, right? You still have to maintain that level of control to ensure that you're safe. And it is truly exhausting to be able to do that and be able to maintain that level of control. But being able to maintain that level of control, no matter how it shows up in the relationship, being able to maintain that level of control is you keeping yourself safe. So, I'm not valued, I don't matter. What that one, in relations to the demon dialogue I talked about in the video last week, that goes to the freeze and flee. Because if partner A um, hits a raw spot in regards to the trash, partner B feels triggered, and then partner B flinches up or shuts down. I'm gonna go take out the trash. I'm gonna be quiet because now I feel worthless because she's had to ask me yet again. I can't remember. Or I work so hard, I do everything, I provide all I can, and even the slightest mistake, the one thing I forget, makes me believe that I am just not going to be enough, that you don't appreciate me. All these things that we tell ourselves, right? Because that's rooted in something. Oftentimes, we're rooted in early, childhood challenges or trauma, unhealthy relationships with parental figures or people who you trusted to raise you. It is maybe rooted in previous relationships prior to the one that you were in, or the history of relational distress that you have yet to release from. So your reaction is, let me just not say anything. Let me go do this and then go find my quiet space because I've just gotten in trouble. And I would love to know, is this something that you find, familiar? Because it happens, it shows up in many relationships. And another one is, I'm not good enough. And so, one, I'm not valued, I don't matter. That's the freeze and flee. I'm not good enough is goes into that finding the bad guy, even when you make yourself the bad guy. So I just want to be sure I am clear on that distinction. I am, I'm not good enough is self blame. I am not valued, I don't matter is that freeze and flee. I need to be in control or I'll be hurt. So I won't get hurt, or I can try to prevent myself from being hurt. I need to maintain a sense of control. And that's your protest polka that I talked about last week, because that is that reach and withdraw. I'm going to withdraw to protect myself. I have to maintain a level of control to ensure this thing that happened to me, whether it's 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 25 years ago, does not happen again. So, in wrapping up, why is finding the raw spots important? In order to work on your that demon dialogue I talked about last week, again, those three, finding the bad guy, protest, polka, and freeze or flee, it's important to understand the raw spot, understanding your partner underneath, may have feelings of abandonment, feelings of shame. When I know this, I may not have this conversation out in public or approach this conversation a different way, because I know once I trample on that raw spot, then the protest, the freeze, or finding the bad guy is gonna show up. So even though it's conversation number two, Conversation number two is important to help work through that conversation number one in the book, which is the demon dialogues. And because if not, it really keeps you in that same loop of dysfunction, relational distress, and high anxiety in your relationship. And our raw spots really offer an explanation to our partners on why we react so heavily to things. My example about the trash, I'll just continue with that one. When partner one says to partner two, hey, you missed the trash today, and now partner two is completely shut down for the rest of the day or goes into blame mode, partner one is like, hey, it's just the trash. What may be small to you is larger to your partner because it signaled an old wound, an attachment cry, something that they haven't yet worked through, which may trigger that feeling of unworthiness, that feeling of shame that has nothing, most of the time, nothing to do with that current relationship, but early on in their childhood. So it may signal to you as nothing, but to them it's a large thing, which is why it's important to have a great understanding of what those raw spots are and not just what they are, but what they mean. Sometimes we may often know what our partner's triggers are, but do we know underneath those triggers what it's really saying? If I say this is going to happen. Why is that happening though? And so once you become aware of that in that level, that vulnerable space, now we don't have to get defensive. Now we don't have to withdraw and separate from each other. Now we don't have to be in this loop because I understand what it does to you, how it affects you, and what's underneath there that has nothing to do with me. Now, for those who are watching and say, hey, this is the cure, hey, that's one really big piece of it, but there's still more, to learn. But that is a really big piece of it. And I implore you to maybe as an assignment to yourself, ask your partner, is there something I say or do that may alert or trigger in you? Now, you are not responsible for how your partner responds. It is important to know what it may do to them, but it is on your partner to work through the emotions that come up with those triggers their self. So um, take some time. And even Dr. Sue Johnson talks about this. And I feel like I just keep leaning forward. Dr. Sue Johnson talks about this in her book. And she says, can you pinpoint a time in your current relationship when you got suddenly thrown off balance, when a small response or lack of response seemed to change your level of safety in the relationship? How did you respond? What did it look like for you? And how did it show up in your relationship? And so, what is your initial reaction and what's underneath that? And when you dig deeper and learn what's underneath that, where does it come from? Who does it remind you of? So, I'm going to, in closing, for real now, next week we are going to be talking about conversation number three. And then conversation number three is going to be revisiting a rocky moment. And so it'll be the same day, the same time I'm going to try my best on, but same day, the same time. And please like, subscribe, share. When you subscribe, you'll be notified when I do come live. Also, you can follow me on the Substack and Facebook And if you have any questions, please put them below, or you can shoot me an email if you have any personal questions that you would like to ask me. And if you are looking for therapy in the states of Texas, Mississippi, and North Carolina, reach out to us at the Relationship Repair Center where we can assist you. Until next time.